Mary was by far the most difficult thing I had to deal with in becoming Catholic. And it really, in looking back now, it really didn't have anything to do with Mary herself. I mean, Mary only comes up in conversation twice. It's at Christmas time, or if you're condemning a Catholic to hell. That's it. Those are the only two times she ever comes up. And in looking back, I think the reason why I had such a problem with Mary and so many potential converts to the church have a problem with her really doesn't have anything to do with her, but really it's out of a healthy fear of offending God. So anything that would detract from the glory that's due to God alone is verboten. You don't do that because Mary and anyone else would detract, and so you just don't do that. I didn't know that the church has very specific teachings about the adoration is due to God alone, and we call that latria. And then there's a special kind of veneration that's given to Mary, and hyperdulia, and then there's dulia to the rest of the saints. None of those distinctions have ever been made for me. And so I just saw people kind of, worshiping Mary, and that caused me a great deal of angst, and I didn't want any part of that because I wanted to go to heaven and not hell. When I encountered Marian devotion in Latin America as a missionary, in the beginning, I think it had a detrimental effect, only because I would encounter people who would really, I'm going to say, for lack of a better term, they would go over the top in a sense. And it just wasn't something that I was raised with, particularly as a Protestant. I mean, I had enough difficulty with the Midwestern Catholics that I saw in their devotion to Our Lady. Well, Latin America, takes it to the next level. So it was a problem in the beginning for me. But I think as time went by, particularly as I developed relationships with people who I saw had a devotion to Our Lady, it started to change a little bit. And it took a long time because it was so different. But I started to see her in a new light in the sense that she was a mother to them. And they really considered her to be a part of their lives in a way that I never had encountered before because it was just God alone. So it took some time, but I think my experience in Latin America started to soften me toward the role of Our Lady. I remember there was once when I was in my apartment and there was some kind of a celebration. I can't even tell you what it was because I don't remember when it was in the liturgical year because I didn't even have a liturgical calendar hardly. But there was a Marian procession, and my visceral reaction was, oh no, not this. And I was even making some progress toward Catholicism at the time, but it just caused me to have a great deal of angst. And what's really ironic and funny in a way is that about 17 or so years later after becoming Catholic, I had the opportunity to carry the Mary in Fatima, and actually lead her in the procession. And no one tells you she weighs so much, by the way, because she's really heavy. But it was one of the greatest experiences of my life. And I think back to those times when I saw those processions as a Protestant, thinking this is just wrong and idolatry. And you see statues and all the rest of it. And now here I am carrying Mary myself, praying, please God, forgive me for all the times that I had that visceral reaction against her as a Protestant, because she is my mother. She's your mother and she's my mother. And I want to give her all the honor and glory that's due to her, not because of herself, but because of what you, God, have done for her. The thing that really got me over the hump of a lifetime of avoidance and false teaching with regard to Mary, really kind of the seminal moment for me, after learning the Marian doctrine and running through the church fathers and learning about the New Eve and the typology and the Ark of the New Covenant and all these kinds of things, I had them in my head, but they hadn't penetrated my heart yet. And when I was going through RCIA at Franciscan University, I was approached by a boss of mine. I was working in the PR department. And he said, would you cover my holy hour for me? And I said, sure, that sounds scriptural. I'll do that. And I didn't even know what holy hour. I said, what's a holy hour? And so he explains it all to me. So I said, what time? He says, 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, who prays at 2 o'clock in the morning, right? So I go downstairs into this basement chapel in downtown Steubenville. It's the middle of winter. Of course, there's nobody else there because who else is crazy enough to go pray at 2 o'clock in the morning? And I was really struggling with Mary still at this point. She was that last thing I had to get over the hurdle on. And I'd gotten to the point where I said, well, if the church is right about all this other stuff, it must be right about Mary too. So I'll accept it intellectually. But again, it hadn't penetrated my heart. But as I'm sitting there in this adoration chapel and I look over, I'm kind of wandering around like, what am I going to pray about for an hour at 2 o'clock in the morning? And there's a big statue of Mary over on the side. And I quickly avert my gaze and there's a pile of rosaries in the kneeler in front of me, and I'm thinking to myself, this woman's stalking me. What am I going to do? I got to deal with this. And so finally I said, all right, Mary, here's your chance. If you are who the church says you are, I want you to do something for me. I want you to reestablish the relationship between me and my Father, because we weren't talking at that point in time. My move into the church was very difficult for him to deal with because I'm a pastor's kid. And my father, I think, felt very poignantly that I was not just rejecting the theology I'd been raised with, but also the family itself and just my tradition and my heritage. And so as Lent had gone on and I was moving toward Easter Vigil, our relationship just kind of deteriorated and we weren't speaking anymore. And so I picked up this rosary, and it was probably glow in the dark, and I said, all right, here's your chance. Just like Gideon, I'm going to throw out my fleece. I want relationship with my dad again. And so I made the sign of the cross. I prayed that rosary with the intention of reestablishing a relationship with my father. That was 2 o'clock in the morning. I went home, woke up. At 2 p.m., the mail came, and in it was a letter from my dad asking to reestablish our relationship for reconciliation. And I was like, okay, Mary, I'm done, right? So not only had I gotten my father back, but God had given me a mother as well in that sense. And that was it. I mean, that was the transition point that just changed my whole relationship with her.